Hello, and thanks for stopping by. With the Christmas season now upon us, I think it's time we cozied down and had a look at some more London pubs. The taverns we'll be exploring in this episode all have names which evoke the story of the nativity, so hopefully this video will get you into the festive mood. Anyway, on that note, get yourself comfy and let's begin. As I'm sure you can imagine, there are quite a few pubs in London with the word Star in their name. There's the Old Star, Turner's Old Star, which was once owned by the artist J.M.W. Turner, who we'll be seeing more of later, several Star and Garters, the Star of Bethnal Green, and so on. Today though, I'm going for the Star Tavern Southwest 1, which you'll find tucked away on Belgrave News West. Belgravia is one of London's most exclusive neighbourhoods. Buckingham Palace is its neighbour after all, and the area's grand streets and squares are lined with imposing embassies and eye-wateringly expensive properties. The Star Tavern was built in the early 19th century to provide the staff who worked in the surrounding palatial homes with a place to unwind after a hard day's toil. In those days, the cobbled mews on which the pub stands would have also been lined with a number of stables for the equally hard-working horses. So nicely appropriate then, considering our nativity theme. It was in the 1950s and 60s that the Star Tavern truly rose to fame. Had you come here during that era, you'd have likely bumped into a different type of star, as a large number of celebrities could often be found drinking here. Dinah Dawes, Albert Finney, and Peter O'Toole, for example, were all regulars, and whenever he was in London, the Star Tavern was also one of Humphrey Bogart's preferred haunts. Let me know in the comments who you'd most like to have a drink with out of that lot. Princess Margaret also popped in on the odd occasion, and legend has it that John Profumo used the pub for secret liaisons with Christine Keeler. Despite attracting this level of clientele, the Star Tavern was also favoured by members of London's criminal fraternity. This very naughty list included Terry Hogan, who'd participated in both the East Castle Street mailbag robbery in 1952 and a heist at London Airport, now of course Heathrow, in 1962. Peter Scott, the so-called King of the Cat burglars, who managed to pinch thousands of pounds worth of jewellery from celebrities such as Sophia Loren, Zsa Zsa Gabor and Elizabeth Taylor. And, perhaps most notoriously, Bruce Reynolds, the man who masterminded the infamous Great Train Robbery, which targeted sacks of cash being carried on the overnight Glasgow to London mail train. This audacious heist was carried out on the 8th of August 1963 at a remote bridge between Leighton Buzzard and Cheddington, approximately 35 miles north of London. Much of the Great Train Robbery was in fact planned within the Star Tavern, as Bruce Reynolds used the pub as an unofficial HQ to meet and discuss the details of the deed with other members of the gang. As the mob was at least 15 men strong, the rule was that no more than 4 could meet in the pub at any one time, so as to avoid arousing suspicion. Watching over all of these crooks and celebs was the tough Irish landlord, Paddy Kennedy. Paddy couldn't care less how famous, wealthy or notorious his punters happened to be, and he was renowned for unleashing a volley of foul-mouthed abuse at anyone who caused him the slightest upset. As with Star, a number of pubs in London have the word Angel in their name. This sculpture, by the way, known as the City Wing, is located on Old Broad Street. The Angel I've picked for this episode is a riverside pub, the Angel in SE16, which sits between Bermondsey and Rotherhithe. Located right beside the Thames on Bermondsey Wall East, the Angel can trace its roots back to the 15th century, when the site was home to a brewery owned by the monks of Bermondsey Abbey, whose monastery was located roughly 1 mile west of here. The present building dates from the 1830s, and although it now stands alone, it was once surrounded by many cramped little buildings, these being the days of course in which London's docks thrived with activity. In 1838, the celebrated artist J.M.W. Turner paid a visit to the Angel and set his easel up on the balcony overlooking the Thames. From this vantage point, he began working on his masterpiece, the Fighting Temeraire, a melancholy painting which depicts an old warship, a veteran of the Battle of Trafalgar no less, being towed to Rotherhithe for scrap. Today, Turner's painting can be viewed inside the National Gallery, but if you can't make it there, it can also be seen on the back of the current £20 note. There are two intriguing sites worthy of attention right outside the Angel. The first are these ruins, which are the remains of a manor house built in around the year 1350 for King Edward III. Back then the Thames was a lot wider than it is today, and this property was situated on what was then a marshy island. It's believed Edward III used this rural retreat to indulge in his great love of falconry, a sport at which he was highly accomplished. In later years, Edward III's grandson, Henry IV, used the manor house for a far sadder purpose. You see, Henry suffered from an upsetting skin disorder, possibly leprosy, and he opted to hide himself away here as a recluse, often swathed in bandages. The other item, or items rather, of note outside the Angel are this group of statues, which together form one of London's most moving artworks, a composition called Dr. Salter's Daydream. Portrayed here are Dr. Alfred Salter, his wife Ada, and their daughter Joyce, whose little pet cat can also be seen nearby. Alfred and Ada Salter really were a remarkable couple. Both were Quakers, and together they vowed to do all they could to help the poor. After marrying in 1900, therefore, they moved to Bermondsey, which at the time was a deeply impoverished area, and they set up a general practice which offered the poorest patients free healthcare, this of course being several decades before the National Health Service was established. This pioneering clinic was located on Jamaica Road. Today the site is occupied by a Bermondsey tube station, and a memorial plaque can be seen inside the ticket hall. Looking to drive change further, the Salters entered politics, and in 1922, Ada was appointed the Mayor of Bermondsey Council, thus making her London's first ever female mayor. Joyce, Alfred and Ada's only child, was born in 1902 and was adored by the many folk in Bermondsey who knew the Salters, so much so that they came to nickname her our Little Ray of Sunshine. Tragically, Joyce died in 1910 after contracting scarlet fever. She was just 8 years old. The daydream referred to in this artwork, therefore, is of a cherished memory held in the minds of the now elderly Alfred and Ada. As Charles Dickens's Ghost of Christmas Past would say, the image of Joyce and her cat are but shadows of things that have been. This is in fact the second version of Dr. Salter's Daydream. Both were created by the sculptor Diane Gorvin, and the first was unveiled in 1991. One night in November 2011, however, the original seated figure of Dr. Salter was stolen, most likely for the purpose of selling on as scrap metal. Fortunately, the statue of Joyce and her cat managed to evade the thieves, and they were promptly placed into safe storage. Following this heartless act, a campaign was established to raise funds to recreate the artwork. Unsurprisingly, many people rallied around, and Diane Gorvin was able to forge a new sculpture of Alfred Salter, along with an additional and much deserved statue of Ada. Joyce and her cat were reinstalled, and the artwork was unveiled in November 2014, complete with additional security. I was lucky enough to be there that day, and as you can probably guess, quite a few people popped into the Angel afterwards to raise a glass to the Salters. Established in 1780, the Lamb Tavern forms part of the magnificent Leadenhall Market, which itself can trace its roots back to the early 14th century. In fact, you can go even further back than that if you want to, as the site on which the market sits was once occupied by Roman Londinium's Forum. The pub and market as they appear today are the result of a rebuild which took place in the 1880s. It's always worth a visit here at this time of year because, in my own personal opinion, the market puts on one of London's best Christmas trees. The Lamb Tavern consists of 3 floors. There's the ground floor bar, a dining room on top, which also became one of London's first non-smoking bars back in the late 1980s. And sandwiched between them is this mezzanine level, which is accessed via a rather precarious spiral stairwell, something to be very wary of if you want the booze. The tavern's eastern entrance also features this mural, which was created in 1889 and depicts Sir Christopher Wren examining plans for the monument. One of the pub's greatest claims to fame is that it was once smashed up in a barroom brawl involving John Wayne. This took place in the 1975 film Brannigan, in which Wayne plays a hard-bitten Chicago cop sent to London on the trail of an American mobster. His co-star, Sir Richard Attenborough, manages to get a few smacks in too. Sticking with movie locations, the entrance to a famous fictitious pub, the Leaky Cauldron, as seen in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, can be spotted just around the corner from the Lamb Tavern. In real life it's an optician's, and you'll find it at the end of Bull's Head Passage. If you've ever seen one of my earliest videos, which took a look at the locations featured in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, then you may recall that Leadenhall Market was once home to a bird named Old Tom. I'll briefly recap the story here though, as it's a great Christmas tale. So Old Tom was a goose who, in the Christmas of 1797, was brought to Leadenhall Market, supposedly destined to end up as a festive meal, complete with all the trimmings. Old Tom was a canny bird though, and when it came to be slaughtered, he made a break for freedom. He continued to evade capture within the market for the next few days, and proved so wily that the traders decided to give Tom a reprieve. He therefore became a sort of pet, or mascot if you will, and continued to live within Leadenhall Market until the grand old age of 38, an amazing lifespan for a goose. The old gander passed away in 1835, and is buried somewhere beneath the market. It's for this reason that, tucked away beside the Lamb Tavern, you'll find a bonus venue, Old Tom's Bar. There are two pubs in London which refer to Three Kings, and as it's Christmas, let's kind of have a look at both of them. The first of our Three Kings is tucked away on Clerkenwell Close, directly opposite the beautiful St James's Church, which dates from the 1790s. The Three Kings in Clerkenwell has one of London's wackiest pub signs, as it features Henry VIII, King Kong and Elvis all together. Inside the pub you'll find a small selection of vintage cameras and related memorabilia. This tiny museum is a nod to the former Kodak headquarters, which was once located on nearby Clerkenwell Road. Rather handily, the famous Three Kings is located right next door to West Kensington Tube Station. It's also very close to West Ashfield Station, which if you haven't heard of, don't worry, it's not for public use. West Ashfield is in fact a mock-up station, used for training London Underground staff, and it's hidden away in Ashfield House, which is off of Beaumont Crescent, just behind the pub. The famous Three Kings was originally known just as the plain old Three Kings, and has been a pub on this site since at least the 19th century. This advertisement, which promotes the inn's spacious and lofty billiard room, which gentlemen are sure to appreciate, dates from October 1885. The Three Kings as it stands today is a result of a rebuild which took place in 1902. Part of the design features this very distinctive bulging glass entrance, which I've always thought looks like a half-ring donut. In 1968, the Three Kings changed its names to the Nashville Room and began hosting live country and western music. The reinvented venue, which was branded the first home of country music in Britain, was officially opened by the US country star Chet Atkins. In the early 1970s, the American musician George Hamilton IV used to compare a live music show at the Nashville Room, which was broadcast by the BBC. By 1976, the Nashville Rooms were being run by David and Mary Young, who had a three-legged Doberman named Hannah, who acted as the venue's guard dog. Hannah had lost her leg 2 years previously, when, at the couple's previous pub in Brixton, the brave dog took on three thieves, who were attempting to rob the till. The crook shot Hannah in the leg before running off empty-handed. For her actions, Hannah became the first civilian dog to receive the Canine Defence League's Medal for Bravery. Under David and Mary's tutelage, the Nashville Room switched to showcasing a very different type of music, namely punk, closely followed by new wave, and in this incarnation, it became one of the major music venues of its era. The Sex Pistols, Joy Division, Steel Pulse, Ian Dury when he was with Kilburn and the High Roads, the Killjoys, the Stranglers, Eddie and the Hot Rods, the Jam, the Undertones, the Boomtown Rats, Aswad, XTC, The Police, Elvis Costello, Susie and the Banshees, and many, many more all played here until gigs ceased in 1980. Things are a lot calmer here nowadays. The famous Three Kings name was adopted in 2000, and the pub is now a large sports bar. Jesus was of course born in Bethlehem, but to my knowledge there are no pubs in London named after that holy city, although please do correct me if I'm wrong. There is a Jerusalem Tavern though, which is a very fine pub indeed, so let's head over there. It's on Britain Street, which is just a short walk from Farringdon Station. The current Jerusalem Tavern is a very young pub in London terms, as it's only opened in the 1990s. The cosy building in which the tavern is housed though does have age. It dates from the 1720s and has been home to numerous businesses over the centuries, including the publishers and the watchmakers. Today it's owned by St Peter's Brewery, who are based in Suffolk, and inside you'll find some interesting tiled displays and a gorgeous open fire. The Jerusalem Tavern also has what must be one of London's most gruesome pub signs, as it depicts the severed head of St John the Baptist. The pub's name is a reference to the Knights of the Order of St John of Jerusalem. Initially, these were a group of monks who established a hospital in Jerusalem in 1080 to care for pilgrims visiting the Holy Land, but when the Crusades began, the order took on a military role. It was during this bloody era, in the 1140s, that St John's Priory was established in Clerkenwell to act as the group's English headquarters. Today, the Priory is famous for the historic St John's Gate, which in the 18th century ended up being turned into a pub called, as you may well have guessed, the Old Jerusalem Tavern. Another early incarnation of the Jerusalem Tavern stood back on Britain Street, although this was demolished in the 1870s. The St John Ambulance Brigade, which was founded in 1877, evolved from the Order of St John of Jerusalem, and St John's Gate is now home to a museum. You can take a shortcut to it from Britain Street via an alley called St John's Path, which is squeezed alongside the present-day Jerusalem Tavern. There's just one problem with the Jerusalem Tavern: it's not open on weekends, so be sure to bear that in mind if you're planning a visit. On that note, I'd like to wish you all a very happy Christmas and the best of luck for the new year. Stay well, friends. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tour of London's nativity-themed pubs. Have you been to any of these pubs yourselves, and can you think of any others that have Christmassy names? If so, please be sure to let me know in the comments. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for the viewership, kind words and support which you've blessed me with over the past year. I started the Robslondon channel in December 2020, and I've been utterly overwhelmed by the goodwill and friendship I've encountered here. It's been nothing short of incredible. So again, to each and every one of you, thank you. If you're new here and haven't yet subscribed, I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as it'd be great to have you along. And if you do sign up, don't forget to click the bell icon to receive notifications whenever I publish a new video. I also have a website, robsonlinedesigns.com, and an Etsy store, robsonlinedesigns, where you'll find a variety of London-themed merchandise, including mugs featuring hand-drawn designs of cabs, tube trains, buses and more. Links are all in the description. If you've made it this far, I'd once again like to wish you all a very happy Christmas. Stay well, and please be sure to stay tuned. See you in the new year.